This week we read Intimate Apparel, and there were a few things that I found that were very interesting themes within this play. One being the idea of pride, and especially George's pride when he came and just decided to not find a job. I mean, he was looking for a job, but instead he had a spotlight vision on what he wanted to do and decided not to accept the jobs that he thought were more dirty and lower class. He didn't want to do those, even though he would be bringing income to his family. He didn't want to do those jobs just out of his pride. He wanted to show his wealth, his newfound wealth, through his wife, and kind of just gamble and cheat and drink. And I thought that was a lot of pride and how it had to do with just ruining his relationship with his new wife. I thought it was awful, and I think at the root of their issues was the pride and George's pride, and it just ended up ruining their entire relationship. And then I also thought that it was very interesting to see what humans will do for love. I mean, you see Esther as this very responsible woman. She started out at 17 working so hard to save her money, and then when George comes around, which she is hopelessly in love with and just wants to feel the tender love and care from him, in order to do that, she gives him half of her life savings just to feel his love and just to receive his love and get the love that she's giving him. And he ultimately doesn't end up doing that, so it's very sad, but just very interesting just to see those two themes with the love and the pride and see them intertwine. And then some values that are being represented in this world, more like themes. I kind of took the theme approach on this one, is kind of like love and its tangles. So we first see these romantic letters and we're like, oh, that's so cute. They're corresponding from like halfway across the globe. And then we realize neither of them actually wrote those letters to each other. They kind of did. They put in their voice a little bit, but it wasn't them writing. It was other people writing them for them. So there is like their love begins on false pretenses. And then we have the amount of, like, there's tons of fruitless marriages in this play where it's first you see Mrs. Van Buren and her husband, and she's just wants to get away from him and he wants to get away from her. They can't have a child. Like, there's just a lot of issues going on there. And then we see just Esther and George is a prime example of a fruitless marriage. They don't really love each other. They can't really love each other. They barely know each other. And then you see Miss Dixon, and she's now a widow, but she talks about her relationship as one that was not of love. It was more of a compromise for her. She just wanted to be taken care of, and which is sad. I mean, nowadays we see, or hopefully I see more often, just people marrying for love rather than just to be taken care of almost. And it's just sad to see that you can see all these tangles and all these caveats with these supposed to be love stories. And then we see deceit. I mean, the biggest deceit theme was when George cheated on Esther with Mamie, which is very sad. But also we see the deceit when it comes to the letters exchanged. Again, neither of them wrote them, and they didn't tell each other that they didn't write them to each other. Neither did they tell each other that they couldn't read or write. So just some little things in there that kind of point towards, like, probably isn't a great relationship going on here. And then, yes, they lied to each other. And reading with a pencil, the first thing, or one of the first things that I circled, or one of the more prominent things that I circled, was boudoir, which is a private room or a bedroom. And within this play, we see a lot of scenes taking place within these private bedrooms, like Mamie and her room in the saloon. We see Mrs. Van Buren's boudoir, her room. And then we also, they mentioned Mr. Marks's bedroom as well. Just these supposed to be intimate places, and I thought it was very interesting that the playwriter decided to make these scenes take place in these intimate places. I think it's a very interesting choice, and it kind of pointed towards the relationship that the author, the playwright, wanted with the audience, just being more transparent and showing what we usually have behind closed doors. And I think this it took place in 1905, but the first time it was like produced and shown on stage, it was 2004. And I think that this was probably like one of the breakout pieces where people are like, whoa, we're really gonna show that? Like, we're gonna show the bedroom? It's usually, like I said, again, it's usually like such an intimate place that we don't usually see on stage or in movies. Well, now we do. Now I see it more often and more often. But I was kind of like bashful, like reading some of these things. I was like, that's usually like closed off, you know, it's whatever's behind closed doors is behind closed doors. There's a lot of intimate things that happen in the bedroom, but here they were the most prominent places where scenes took place. I thought that was very interesting. And then with diversity, I mean, I'm a white woman reading about Black individuals, and I thought it was pushing me more out of my comfort zone to it was more like an educational thing to me, and I hope that was the right way to take this as well. It's kind of educated me more about like what happened, how they felt. It was really powerful reading kind of about the oppression that Esther was feeling just from her perspective. When I read her lines with especially her and Mrs. Van Buren, and how Mrs. Van Buren said, like, I can't take you into my house. It'd be so scandalous. Like, it really made me sad and kind of start to feel possibly, I mean, I can never feel the amount of racism that Black people are experiencing, especially today. I can never feel it, but it kind of gave me a glimpse into what it's like in that life. But there were some stereotypes that I saw that were both reinforced and then reinvented, which was very like both sides of the scene. So Black women in domestic work. It was seen that the stereotype was that Black women and women in general deserved to be in the home. That was their place. They cook, they clean, they care for the kids. That was their place. And just as that stereotype was reinforced in this play, Esther was the one who like sewed, she cooked, she worked in the home, and she also like attended church. That was a big one too that I saw. But that really reinforced the idea that women, especially and Black women, were just, their job was to be in the home. And then also, unfortunately, I have heard the stereotype that African Americans or African American men are lazy and don't spend their money correctly, and that's the reason why 22% of the African American population is in poverty today, the biggest statistic that we can see. Very sad, again, very sad. And this I saw kind of reinforced in this play when George, without a job, not using his own money, was gambling and drinking and just kind of showing off his wealth that he didn't actually have. He was using somebody else's money, and then it also ultimately led to him cheating. So I thought that was kind of unfortunately reinforced in this play from what I've heard in the past. And then also I see stereotypes reinvented as well. I mean, we see Esther. It's not the man that's the breadwinner in this case. It's Esther, and she has been working since she was 17, and she really has this amazing amount of savings that she's been stingy all her life trying to save up this money, and here it is. She's finally has a good amount of wealth, and she can buy nice things, and her man drains it, which is usually we see the other way around. We usually see like the women going out shopping, but in this play, the stereotype that the men are the breadwinner is completely reinvented. It's the woman in this case who was the hard worker and was the one who was responsible, and she was boss. And then also, I see both sides of the spectrum with this stereotype that I talked about earlier, especially the lazy and they don't spend their money correctly. And then I also see African American men being a hard worker in this play. I mean, we see Mr. Marks, first of all, being a very hard worker and a salesman. And then we also see George, he was in the slums. He was digging the Panama Canal. I mean, that's pretty much like the worst of the worst, the hard work. And I mean, he talked about how many people died. Just very, very hard-working man at first until the money changed him. But very, very hard worker, very hard-working man. Which is very much reinventing the idea that Black men are lazy and don't spend their money correctly, which is kind of nice. And then also, so stereotypes in general, yes, they exist today. I mean, I still hear, and unfortunately, like the lazy and don't spend their money correctly, that's something that I've heard recently, and it's very sad to see and sad to hear about, that's a viewpoint today. But I just want to talk about stereotypes for a second. And stereotypes, I just looked up the definition, and it says that stereotypes are a generalized belief about a particular group of people learned and taught. And so they're not rigid. They can be changed, obviously, but they are also formed. Like, stereotypes in our minds are formed to help individuals characterize a very complex world, attributing certain traits, jobs, and other attributes to certain groups. So that's pretty much like where stereotypes came from. We kind of do it instinctively to categorize a very complex world, which we do have a very complex world. So stereotypes can be very good and very bad. And in this case that we're talking about with like racial slurs and racial stereotypes, they are more of the negative stereotypes that we're seeing. So the Journal of Psychological Science says repeated passing of social information from person to person results in the formation of cultural stereotypes. So what perpetuates stereotypes is people passing them down, and also people starting them, like humans starting them. They take a little nugget of knowledge of maybe possibly a truth, and they inflate it and then generalize a huge community just based on what they've seen and heard and based on what they've taught. So yes, they can change. Stereotypes can change. I mean, we've seen so many stereotypes change and start and all of that good stuff. But especially with men being the breadwinner, we've seen more women going out and working, more men staying in the home, and that's just one specific example that I can think of. And then lastly, I want to leave you with two questions that I asked or I thought were very interesting and wanted to know more about. What was the significance of Mamie working in a saloon? And then also, how did love change from a rare luxury, as we see in this play, to more of a necessity? I mean, now, hopefully, I mean, I see it. I see more people marrying for love rather than for maybe class or just to be married. I mean, or just to have somebody to take care of you. I see more marrying for love. And how do you think that changed, or did it change? Thanks.